But it's like men cannot get pregnant because man refers to male, and males cannot get pregnant. Just
Hold
because
on.
you call
Okay.
someone male or female doesn't change the reality of their biology.
Okay, that defies everything that we agreed on earlier.
No, it doesn't.
Yes,
But
it does.
we would have to identify where you feel like that disagreement is, because I feel like we were completely on step.
We were until you said that. What is more likely to be done by the male sex?
So you,
Yes.
you think it's a matter of probability. I think it's a matter of reference to the traits of the sex itself.
That is probability. Yes, that's the same thing.
Something that can't happen is not more or less likely. It's impossible.
No, that you realize that's still the same thing. You're going back and forth on me. You got to pick
I'm
one
not.
or the other.
I'm not. We have
Hold on, no. Hold on.
concept.
You just changed your language. So pick one. You are changing your language every time you speak.
My
It's
language,
driving me insane.
And you think man or woman refers to a social stereotype of masculinity and femininity. Right. I know.
And that's the way that we use it as well.
Well, that's not truly the way that we use it.
So then you're talking about what they intend to mean versus what it is that they're actually using within a pragmatic language barrier.
I'm talking about their understanding of the meaning of the word at the most fundamental level.
That is almost always going to be the case, except for a very, very small minority.
That's an exception that only you and some people have accepted out of a sense of sort of like maybe social justice duty. But I
don't care about the social justice duty. I care about linguistics and how we come to meaning.
Doing that. It's
okay,
female.
well, nobody in linguistics believes in inherent meaning. All of language is socially constructed, so there can't be an inherent meaning.
I'm sorry. It feels like that's just a decision to run away from the concept of things being true or false.
Do with masculinity.
Well, you should expand your definitions to be more accurate. Stop being so close-minded.
I'm not talking about expanding definitions. You don't
that's
have
stupid.
me, and that's what I'm trying to explain to you.
I didn't realize that. I should have worn a hat.
Okay.
So you're saying that because, say, like a cat has, we sort of categorize that still with certain gender. So we would maybe view cats as being feminine, since that's still in relation to femininity or masculinity, that overall spectrum, that cat gender could hypothetically be a gender because ultimately it is actually still referring to the spectrum of gender.
Yeah, they could be used.
It's not referring to the spectrum. It's not. So, okay, this is where they're getting mixed up. Okay, so this is ridiculous. This is so annoying. All right. I feel like this is so basic. I feel weird that I'm even pointing this out. Okay. So we have masculine and feminine right here. Okay. So they're saying, hey, cat gender refers to this, right? They're saying that cat gender is referring to this thing. But what the reference is that this is just like a thing that we would consider to be masculine or feminine. That doesn't make it gender. I can say the color pink is feminine. Pink is not gender. It is gendered, but it is not gender in and of itself. I can draw a straight line to it, but that doesn't mean that they are now the same thing. That does not put them on the spectrum. This is a reference to it. This is a way of categorizing it. So if I say, I have personality traits that are feminine, okay? That means that the personality trait is something that is going to move you on the spectrum from like becoming more feminine or less feminine, right? Gender is how you grade these personality traits. Gender is how we look at this and say, how masculine is it or how feminine is it? But to say we look at cat and say cat is a feminine thing, that does not mean that cat is now a gender. That's totally different. That is you're just referencing gender for this, but cat does not become gender. Just as personality can be gendered, but personality is not gender. Right? These are completely different things. Masculine means male, feminine means female. Those refer to objective sex. Hold on. Yeah, okay. Yo.
Hey, what's up, man?
Yo, so, okay, real quick. I have an entire document on this. I've researched gender for years, okay? So, masculinity is it is a stereotype of a male. It's something. So
Yeah.
if we say something is masculine, we're saying this is stereotypical of a male, or it is
Right.
something that we would expect of a male. And the more likely it is for you to expect it of a male, the more masculine it is. So
Sure.
if Hulk Hogan is the most masculine person we can think of, we would think, okay, how likely is it for Hulk Hogan to do this thing or act this way, or how likely is this likely to be a characteristic of Hulk Hogan? Do we agree with this?
No, you'd say of how likely, as far as masculine, it would be how likely it is for all men, anyone who's male.
Well, not all men, because it's on a spectrum. So some men
But
are
that would
going
still,
to be more
it's a
or
spectrum of all
less.
men. It's a spectrum of all males.
It is, right. I'm saying Hulk Hogan is the most masculine thing, and we're saying that the more masculine it is, like the more likely it is for Hulk Hogan to do it. I'm not saying what, like,
Okay, I
yeah.
understand what you're saying.
Okay. All right. So we agree on this part. So okay. So go ahead from there.
Sure. Well, okay, so the thing is, the concept of male and female, that's biological, and the concept of masculine and feminine only has meaning as much as it references the stereotypes that we
Right.
associate with male and female,
Right.
and that's called gender. So gender
Yes.
has no meaning separated from sex
Right.
because it's reference to sex. But
Exactly.
within itself, it's just a concept, right?
Well, so
but
what?
it's just, so when they say it's social, let me, so I'll say, but
Yeah, go.
it's so, to say it's socially constructed means that everyone has different concepts about male and female across all time and different cultures. That's true. But where they overlap, and I think that's what I'm saying now is what I think what you're saying about Hulk Hogan is what we associate to all of them, and that's the concept of gender.
Yes, it always refers back to what
Sure.
is most likely or more likely of that sex. Yes.
Or what we consider to be more intrinsic. Yes. Because
I
there's-
wouldn't say more
well-
intrinsic. Like somebody wearing a skirt, we would call that feminine, but
Sure.
not because it's intrinsic, but just because it's more likely that a female would wear a skirt.
That's true, but then it does come down to things like men have penises and they don't have uteruses. Men
Yeah.
cannot conceive and get pregnant,
Mhm.
right? But
Yeah,
some
there are
people
personality traits and stuff like
but-
that are more like
Yes.
to do with like your brain or testosterone or estrogen and things
Right.
like that. Yeah.
But when we start seeing things where people say like men can get pregnant, that's just false. And they're like, no, it's gender because man and woman is just gender. But it's like men cannot get pregnant because man refers to male and males cannot get pregnant. Just
Hold
because
on.
you call
Okay.
someone male or female doesn't change the reality of their biology.
Okay, that defies everything that we agreed on earlier.
No, it doesn't.
Yes,
But
it
we'll
does.
have to no, well, we would have to identify where you feel like that disagreement is because I feel like we were completely on step.
We were until you said that. So if masculinity refers to gender and gender is where you land on the spectrum, then the more masculine you are, the more likely we are to call you a man. Not a male, but a man. The concept of masculinity attaches to what a
But
male is
man
more likely
only
to
refers
do.
to males, right?
Yes,
But
but
males
no,
cannot
But
conceive.
that
They
doesn't mean
cannot
that
get
they're the same
pregnant.
thing. That doesn't
Yes,
mean
it
that they're the
does.
same. No,
It
it
means
doesn't.
they-
Them referring to it does not mean
But-
it's the same
but
thing. That's
then-
literally, hold on. This is literally what I'm explaining their problem is right now. Is they're saying a cat is something that we would consider feminine and it refers to femininity. Therefore, it is gender. No,
Right.
it refers to gender, not that
I
it
feel like
is
that's
gender.
what-
You're
I feel
doing
like-
the same thing where you're saying
No.
man refers to male, therefore
Yes.
it is male.
Yes.
And that's not what it. Yes, and
You
you're
are
making the
no,
same
no,
mistake
because,
as them.
because no, I'm not making a mistake. I feel like you are making their mistake because you have separated them so entirely that you feel like one concept can actually be completely divorced from the other. And they are doing that too.
I'm not
and
divorcing it from the other. I'm saying it refers to it. You're saying they're the same thing. I'm saying
Men
they
cannot
refer
get
to it.
like a man refers to males and males cannot get pregnant. Do we agree on this?
Hold on, you're jumping too many steps. When
No,
you
I'm
say
not.
refers to,
I'm like literally 1, 2. I'm going 1 and then 2, and you think there's
No,
space.
I would say
you think
men-
it's 1, 2, 3.
yeah, men can get
You think
pregnant.
there's a
Yes.
space? Why would you think that?
Because if someone is masculine, we would call them a man. That's
No, we
what we're
wouldn't.
talking
No,
about.
we don't do
then
that.
you don't think
Some-
it refers to masculinity and femininity. Don't say you do if that's not what you're referring to. You're referring to sex, not to masculinity and femininity.
Masculinity refers to the male sex.
What is more likely to be done by the male sex.
So you
Yes.
think it's a matter of probability. I think it's a matter of reference to the traits of the sex itself.
That is probability. Yes, that's the same thing.
Sure. Okay, and you think in the space between where something can't ever happen, you can still refer to something as male. So you think
Not as male, as masculine.
as masculine. So you think it can be a masculine thing to get pregnant.
No, not a masculine thing. No,
Why?
because it's more likely of the female.
It's not
sex.
more likely, it's impossible for males to get pregnant.
The idea of
There's a zero probability.
masculinity. It doesn't matter. It's the idea of it is what is more likely. So when
So
I
the
say something
idea
is
is-
masculine,
something
all
is-
I'm saying is that it is
But
more
something-
likely of the male sex. And it
Something
is
that can't happen is not more or less likely. It's impossible.
no, that you realize that's still the same thing.
But that's why
That is
people are
still
talking
more
about
likely.
whether or not you can be a cat. And you're like, that's insane, and it doesn't even map on. Well, getting pregnant doesn't map on to being male, but you still talk about probabilities. So
Okay.
why do you have that link? Why do you have a link between things that can never happen and you still consider them part of the same category?
Are sex and gender the same thing?
Gender refers to sex.
Right.
So they're
Okay.
not the same thing, but
Exactly.
where one is meaningless, the other is meaningless.
What is the reference?
The reference is expectation,
Yes.
and where something is impossible, there is zero expectation. And
Yes,
it is
okay.
impossible for
Yes.
males to get
Hold on.
pregnant, so there
Hold
can be no such thing as masculine pregnancy.
Hold on. So you are doing what they're doing. Okay. So
You
you're
are
saying
you are doing what they're doing.
okay, so just listen. You are saying getting pregnant is a feminine thing. Okay. Now you're saying a masculine person cannot do a feminine thing. That is what you are saying.
No,
and that
no,
is
I'm
not
not saying
true.
it's backwards.
That is what you're
Backwards.
saying. You're saying that getting
gotta say it the
pregnant
other
is a
direction.
feminine thing, and therefore a man
Hey.
could not do it
No, no, no,
because
no,
it
no,
is
no.
feminine.
Okay, if that's what you're hearing, that's fine. But I'm not saying that a masculine person can't get pregnant. I'm saying that getting pregnant cannot be masculine.
Okay, I agree with that. That's totally different
Right,
than
right.
saying you said a man
It's just a matter of direction.
cannot get pregnant. That's
It's a
what you
matter of-
said.
A man cannot get pregnant.
Okay, you're going back and forth on me. You got to pick
I'm
one
not.
or the other.
I'm not. We
Either
have different
hold on, no,
understandings of the
hold on.
concept.
You just changed your language. So pick one.
You're the
Either
one changing the
a
language.
man cannot get pregnant, or it's that a getting pregnant is not a masculine thing. It's one
Getting
or the
pregnant
other.
is not a masculine thing. Man refers to male, which is masculine.
That
And
doesn't
so
mean that
a
it's the same thing
you can
as,
say
as
you
male.
could say someone who is masculine or who has masculine traits could get pregnant, but they have to be a woman and they have to be female. Men cannot get pregnant, and man refers to male.
Okay, you are changing your language every time you speak.
my
It's driving
language,
me
like,
insane.
The thing is, you've accepted that there's a difference where I don't see a difference.
Okay, okay. Does being a man refer to masculinity or to being a male? Which one?
It refers to being a male.
Okay, so that's where we disagree.
Yes,
I
that is
believe
where we
being a
disagree, of
man
course.
is where. So this is what I described earlier, though, and you agreed with it. Is that being a man refers to masculinity, and masculinity refers to what is more likely of a specific sex, and
Sure.
and so that's where we disagree. Male,
Right, that is where we disagree.
male is the sex part. Man is like what we can see, what we expect, what we
Sure.
look at. And so we look at you, we categorize you within our brains, and we say, okay, this is where I fit you within this category. And that category is going to be based on masculinity or femininity.
Sure. Right. So you think male and female is a spectrum category? I don't. I think male and female refers to. Or
No,
you
I
think
don't.
Man,
I think
no,
man
sorry,
and
no, I
woman.
didn't mean to.
Yes.
I didn't mean to
Okay.
misrepresent you. You think man and woman is a spectrum category?
Yes.
I think man and woman is an age spectrum referring to male and female. Adult human being males are men. Adult human females are women. That's the spectrum that I understand. And you think man and woman refers to a social stereotype of masculinity and femininity.
Mhm.
Right. I know.
And that's
And
the
I
way
know
that
that.
we use it as well.
Well, that's not truly the way that we use it. That is a way that it is. It's true that it is a way it is used, but I do
It
not
is the
believe that
way
that
that
is where it
everybody
derives its
uses
function.
it.
And that's not all the way that everybody uses it. That is the way that some people use it, and it is the way that some people have chosen to try to understand it, to incorporate and be
Look,
tolerant or
I
accommodating to different minority groups
I will
within our
send you the
current political
data on
system.
this, but I promise you this is the way that everybody uses it.
No,
Okay, you look at
I'm
somebody
sorry.
and you say,
I trust you, but I don't. Yeah, that promise means nothing because I'm sorry. That's simply not the case.
if I showed you the data that said that people look at somebody and say, do they look like a man or a woman? And I'm going to call them a man or a woman based on that. You're saying that wouldn't be good enough, or that you don't believe that that's the case?
I think even if you showed me that data, if you said to people, if I told you the truth and they were not like, and they didn't have to put their real names and get like blown up on Twitter or get fired from their jobs, and you said, if we were in a booth or something and it was private, and I said, hey, regardless of how this person looks, if I told you that they were male or female, would you consider them man or woman? I believe 99% of the country, this country, and all people in the world would say, no, 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 man and woman means male and female.
Yeah, you're changing what it is we're talking about. I'm saying you don't use man and woman based on sex. You think that sex is something assumed based on them being a man or a woman. So you look at them, you say, this looks like a masculine person. I'm going to assume they are also a male. That is different from saying male and man are the same exact thing
I'm
and
not
mean the
saying
same
that.
thing.
I'm not saying the thing you just said I was saying.
Okay, so then you're talking about what they intend to mean versus what it is that they're actually using within a pragmatic language barrier.
I'm talking
So,
about their understanding of the meaning of the word at the most fundamental level.
right, but I'm saying that's not how we use the word.
It's like this. It's like, I guess maybe, I don't know if this will clarify or muddy the waters, but it's like if someone said, "Hey, I'll show you like a baby." And if I said a baby, would you think that was someone who was under 2 years old and couldn't walk and was still crapping in diapers? Or would you think it was someone who was 80 years old? And people would go, a baby is someone who can't walk. It's like a very underdeveloped, it's not quite a child. If we say child, that's kind of like a kid who can walk. They're a little older, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like people would think, when people say baby, they think of a certain age range, someone who can't walk or take care of themselves at all. And then a little older is a child, and then at a certain range, and I know it's a spectrum and it's different, there would be adult, and that's like a grown person who, you're like, you're on your own, you're autonomous, you can make your own decisions, and I won't stop you from smoking or something. Like if you ask people, like if you asked someone and you showed them an 80-year-old and you went, is that a baby? They would say, no, that's not a baby, they're 80 years old. And if you showed someone and you said, hey, regardless of how this person looks, they have a vagina, and they're biologically female. Are they a man or a woman if they're full grown? They would say they're a woman.
Okay,
That's the
I
meaning of the
understand.
word.
No, a meaning of a word, that's not, we don't get meaning based on intent. We get meaning based on usage. We get meaning based on colloquial usage of a
We get
word
meaning
and
based
what is
on
being
understanding.
communicated. Yes, wait, but yes, it's what's being communicated. So if I tell somebody, hey, look over there, that's a woman, you would look for somebody who looks feminine, not for somebody who has a vagina. But you're talking about sex, which
But
is
I would
biology.
assume that the
And
person you were talking about had a vagina.
yes, that's what I said. Yes, that's what I said. That's what I said
Yes.
earlier, and you disagreed with that.
And
I
if
said
they, if
man
you,
and woman
even
are
if they
not the
looked
same.
like a
Hold on,
woman,
hold on. I
sure.
said man and male are not the same thing, but that we assume a man is also a male. That's what I said.
I would assume if you said, here's the thing, this is what I would assume, this is my whole argument. You can disagree, it's fine. But if you said, and no one looked like immediately, and you said, everyone look over there, there's a woman, and it was important, and everyone looked, everyone would expect to be looking at a female.
Yeah, yes. But
Not
we're
someone
talking about
presenting as a female,
expectation.
not someone living the act of femininity, a female.
Okay, you are crossing over what it is that we're saying, but again, like we're talking about different things. So one is, what do we intend to mean or intend to communicate with something, and what is an assumption that comes with that communication, and what are we actually communicating within reality? What is it that actually gets communicated with this idea? So if I say, this is my parent, and you look at them, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, they probably had sex and conceived this guy, and now that's their parent. If you found out later that that actually they adopted me, it wouldn't change the idea of what meant to be a parent. It would mean it changed the assumption that came with the word, and that's what I'm talking about. Is that
it would change it?
How?
It would change that.
How?
It would change it in the sense that I would still understand that you were their parent and their guardian and that you were the person taking care of them, but I would understand that they were not your genetic child. They were not like your blood.
Yes, exactly. So that's what I'm
Right.
saying, is that we would have like a different idea of what it is that that's coming with this word parent. But you would say, yeah, like, oh, it's a biological parent. I assume they were a biological parent, but I wouldn't say they're not their parent now. That's not their dad. That's not their father. Like you would say, I'm not going to change the overall, like, what's being communicated based on the fact that I just found out that it's not biological.
Correct.
It's the same with man and woman, where we're going to say, we assume that a man is going to be a male. That is almost always going to be the case, except for a very, very small minority.
That's an exception that only you and some people have accepted out of a sense of sort of like maybe social justice duty. But I
don't
think
care
that
about the social justice duty.
Well,
I care about linguistics and how we
There's
come
no other
to
point to
meaning.
doing that.
Again,
What other point is there for assuming that someone who is not female is a woman?
Listen, you are talking about prescriptive on like what you want the word to mean. I'm talking
No, I'm
about
talking
what
about its inherent meaning.
Okay, there is no inherent meaning. I don't
Yes,
believe
there
in
is.
that.
It's
Okay,
female.
well, nobody in linguistics believes
It's
in
adult
inherent
female.
meaning. All of
It's
language
inherent
is
meaning of
socially
the- of-
constructed, so
I mean,
there
like,
can't
it's
be
like-
an inherent meaning.
I'm sorry. It feels like that's just a decision to run away from the concept of things being true or false.
You calling it, yes, there is no real true or false. That's just made up. These are things that we make up.
Well, that's the difference. That's where you and I disagree.
Okay, yes, I don't believe in inherent. I don't believe things are inherent if they are socially constructed. I guess I'm way out there, and this is just an odd thing
anything
for me.
that is not socially? What is something that's not socially constructed?
Like chromosomes.
Well, that's just a word.
Well, no, not.
Can't you just then disagree on the meaning of the word and say that it's all socially constructed?
I'm not talking about the meaning of the word. I'm talking about what it is I'm referring to.
And I'm talking
Chromosomes.
me too. And I'm speaking to a female human being.
Yes, but hold on. You are saying that I could say that chromosome inherently means what it is I'm referring to, and I'm telling you it cannot inherently mean that. It is socially constructed.
Then why did you use it as an example of something not socially constructed when I asked you to give me an example of something that wasn't?
I'm giving you, I said, I'm not talking about the word. I'm talking about what it is that I'm referring to. The chromosome itself, the thing that I'm referring to, is not socially constructed.
Right,
The
and
word
neither is a female.
to refer to it is socially constructed.
But
all
yes,
language
that's fine.
is socially
All
constructed.
language, exactly. Wait,
So it can't be inherent.
You're saying that the idea of a chromosome is something not socially constructed, and I'm saying the idea of a female is something not socially constructed. The word is. Right?
Yes, I agree with that.
But a female is not, and the word woman refers to female.
Yes, I agree with that, but but you said that the word the reference is inherent, and that's what I said is untrue because all language is socially constructed.
Okay, but it feels like I mean, you want to draw a distinction or a difference between the words we use, like what we're referring to in the words we use, and say that the words are socially constructed, which is true, but then you want to pretend that like chromosomes are more true than what a female is, and I don't agree with that.
I don't.
Okay, but then why are we disagreeing? What are we disagreeing? What do you think? What do you think our ultimate disagreement is? You don't believe, but you do believe something is true.
I believe that we can have agreed upon things based on social construction, and that in order for us to communicate, we have to communicate something where we have a shared understanding of that word and what it is that we're referring to when we use that word. So when I'm talking about what it is we expect when we use a word, this is what we are actually communicating, not what it is that we think correlates with that at a high degree, but it is what it is that we're actually looking for and actually communicating. What details do we use to decide whether or not this is a thing? So We would separate the idea of female and woman so that we are communicating more things now. We have more to communicate, and you want to communicate less things and say,
I want
let's
to
just
be
have
accurate in this, but the thing is, like, that's like just that's the
You're not being
that's the point.
accurate.
I am being accurate because the point is that you're at the point now. You just disagree with where you draw the line, and the xenogenders are saying like, "Well, I'm a cat, and I want to be more accurate, so I want to refer to myself as cat gender." I'm expanding the definition to be more accurate.
But the cat has nothing to do with masculinity.
Well, you should expand your definitions to be more accurate. Stop being so close-minded.
I'm not talking about expanding definitions.
Bam.
You don't
That's
have
stupid,
me
dude.
because you're
I'm
not
fucking around. I'm fucking around.
Okay,
but my point
I was
is,
going to say, I'm not doing that.
But my point is, I'm sorry. I'm not. I know. But my point. I'm sorry. I apologize. But I'm just saying, like, the thing is, you believe that you're being more accurate by expanding a definition, and so do the xenogenders. And you're like, no, you're not. You're muddying the waters, and you're breaking reference to what the words actually mean. And that's my point when you try to use the words man and woman to refer to things outside of male and female. And you're like, no, I'm expanding it to be more accurate. Well, they think they're expanding it to be more accurate.
Right.
And you disagree.
Well,
so that's where I see you and we're
I understand.
Like, your goalposts moved past mine, and theirs moved past yours.
Yeah, this is why I'm saying you guys are being prescriptive in the way that you talk about this. I'm talking about from a linguistic perspective on how we come to definitions of words and how we come to understanding. I am going through that process and saying, this is how we know what this word means and how we're referring to a different thing than we are when we talk about male and female, because male and female are biological words that we're using to communicate sex, and man and woman are more socially used words that we use to communicate some sort of role that we expect when we look at somebody.
I would never see. I only consider man and woman to refer to sex and age to a certain degree, or you could call it a maturity if you want, because people disagree on the age, and age is purely numbers. I see it, and then when I said that, you said, "Well, I'm expanding it," and you said, "Yeah, right." But then when you said, "Well, we're expanding it to include other things like gender," which is, and it's like, well, I'm not expanding it. I think when you expand, well, okay, apologies. I don't mean to misrepresent you. That's how I understood what you were saying.
Yeah, no, I'm saying we're not changing the definition.
If we ever,
go
ahead. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I'll just finish really briefly. I was going to say, we'll probably arrive at that point again, and if that's what I thought you meant then, I'll probably, if we get there again, think you mean that again if you make your same point, and we might end up at the same contradiction. But I don't mean to misrepresent you.
I understand the difference. Okay, so yes, this is when I say you're being prescriptive and that those people are being prescriptive. They're saying, this is what I would like the word to mean, and I would like to move in a direction where that's what the word means. Whereas I'm saying we already have a process of coming up with definitions for words so that we understand what it is we're communicating and what it is that we are referring to when we use a word. And I'm saying linguistically, we use pragmatics to come up with definitions so that we can put them in dictionaries. And any dictionary that you go to will tell you this is the process that we use to come to definitions of words. And so when we use man or woman, we look at what is actually being referred to and how we come to that conclusion that is that thing. And so if we're using visuals and things like that to decide whether or not somebody is a man or a woman, but we're using biology to decide whether or not somebody is male or female, we're talking about different things. And if what we're looking at when we look at a man or a woman is based on masculinity and femininity, then that is what we are referring to.
Okay, so that's a definition. We have different definitions for the words, and that's ultimately always going to be our contention. I think that's understood. And I know you think like, well, mine's right. And I'm like, well, I don't think it is. And I think mine's right.
Well, I'm just saying it's the process of coming to a definition that I'm using a linguistic process that this is how we come to know what it is we're referencing. And I feel like other people are saying, well, this is what I want it to mean anyways, regardless of how that process is used.
Well, I mean, the point is they're trying to use that process to change the meaning of the word gender to incorporate things that you don't think it has any meaningful reference to, and they're going to use that process to change the meaning of gender into something that you recognize as meaningless, which is my contention with your redefinition, what I call a redefinition. I don't mean to, I don't want to assert that on you, but it's our contention. That's my contention with your, what I perceive to be your redefinition or your acceptance of it, of man and woman, away from the basics of biological, of an adult male and female in biological sex. You think it means reference to masculinity and femininity, and I don't.
Mhm.
I think those are superfluous definitions. I think those are secondary definitions. I think their primary definition is purely male and female adult. That's
Okay,
it.
so the thing is, okay, so yeah, so I like Mr. Girl would say, okay, you're right, but that is how we use these words to like decide whether or not somebody is a man or a woman. This is how like the process that we would go through. But we would be wrong if they are the other sex. We would end up just being wrong about that. And I would say we can't be wrong about how we use language. So if tomorrow all of a sudden we all decide that the sky is green now, and it didn't change colors, but we're just saying it's green now. The sky is just green now. We're not wrong. We're using words differently now, just as we have with so many other things. Like if we say the word cool, all of a sudden it used to mean cold. Now it means I like that thing or that's good, right?
But the thing is, that's assuming that there's some sort of like 100% agreement. You know, to say that we can't be wrong is who is we? Who is the we? There's groups that disagree on things.
But hold on, you're talking about I'm talking about what is actually being communicated with a word. You're talking about what is like the written definition. So a definition is different from a meaning.
I'm not.
And
I'm talking about the understanding. I'm talking about the meaning too. I'm not referring to some authoritative body who's editing the journals. I'm referring to what I understand to be essentially, well, I mean, do believe that it is an institutional understanding across all of the world, other than within certain Western countries in the past few years.
Mhm.
But I do believe that what I'm referring to, like, if someone says that building is on fire, I'm assuming pretty much everyone who understands the meaning of the word fire understands that there is a fire in a building and it is burning, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
like, if everyone decides tomorrow that that building's on fire means that there are free tacos, then if everyone does that, that's fine. But if only half of the people do that, and then they want to say like, no, fire, the building's on fire means that there's free tacos now. Now we have a contention, and now we have a conflict within society.
Yeah.
And that is the state that I currently feel that we are in on the topic of the meaning of man and woman.
Yes, it is the state that you and those other people are in. Whereas
Well, you're the other people too.
Well, again, people in linguistics are not worried about your politics. We don't care what you want it to mean. We don't
Are
care
you the
about
people in linguistics? Am I talking to a man of linguistics?
Yes, and that's what I'm trying to explain to you.
I didn't realize that. I should have worn a hat.
Okay. Well, that's what I'm trying to explain is that there is a process as to how we come up with definitions and understanding meaning of words.
And you're a part of it, and I'm not.
No, I'm saying that I can explain it in a way that people can have a conversation with me about it. I'm not sitting here saying I'm the authority. You have to listen to me. I'm saying that the process is the authority.
Well, I don't think your process is correct, and neither do most and many people.
Okay, it's just this is the process.
And what's the difference?
Well,
you're like, I'm using a process. It's like, motherfucker, I'm using a process too. I just disagree with yours.
Yeah, no, I'm saying the process for how we come up with definitions. Like, this is how dictionaries come up with meaning for words.
So,
like,
are you going to agree with xenogenders if there's a process and someone tells you that they're the authority and they've been using a process? Are you going to go, oh, I didn't realize you were using a process and you were a linguistic person, I wasn't doing that? Are you going to change your mind?
Based on the process, yes. They can't just say there is a process, therefore you have to listen. It's whether or not I trust
they're trying to develop
process.
the process now.
No, they're not. They're not. That's the whole point, is that when we say gender is on a spectrum, we are using a linguistic term about terminology and about concepts. That is what we're talking about. Whereas they think gender on a spectrum is a way to be inclusive for other people. And it is not about being inclusive. It is about the way that the concept is used.
Okay. I can understand if that's your contention with that. And I think we both I understand. I know I disagree with you, but I do appreciate the conversation still. I guess I feel like you're willing to accept a definition under the premise, I'll call it premise, of it being a process or, serving a different kind of function. I simply believe that that the words serve a necessary and succinct function, and expanding them to include something outside of that function dilutes them and makes them meaningless. But I've made that point, and I understand you disagree. Sorry. It's okay.
I think I understand now. Okay, I think I understand. Okay. So all right. If a scientist says like this is how we came to this conclusion, I can look at his process and say, okay, do I think that was a good process to come to that conclusion? Is that actually a scientific process? And is this useful in order to come to the conclusion that they're looking for? That's what I'm talking about, is I'm saying we have a process for coming up with definitions and meanings of words to understand them within pragmatics, and we can look at the process and say, I trust this process.
Right.
Therefore, whatever conclusion this process comes to is what that meaning is. Just as the same as within science, if they go through the scientific method and actually use the process correctly, we would trust the conclusion at the end. And so
Sure.
what I'm asking for is that people actually look at the process for how we come to meaning of words, and then they apply that to words like man and woman, and then come up with the meaning from there. And
Sure.
that's where I'm coming from, is I feel
Okay.
like we have a scientific process for coming up with definitions of words, and people are just ignoring that process
I
instead
see.
of using it. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. We'd be treading. That's fine. I appreciate. That's a very concise, or at least a final point. I mean, I would keep talking only because I know we're still going to be in contention.
Yeah.
So I would just keep going back and forth. I just talk about it all the fucking time. But I appreciate the conversation. It was really fun.
Yeah,
I
me
mean,
too,
but it
man.
wasn't just fun. It was interesting, and I appreciate it.
I
Thank you.
didn't know that Brent in the chat was BrentoBox. I had no idea.
Oh, really? Oh, that's good.
I've seen you a bunch of times, and I didn't know that that's who you were. So
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
glad
that's
I
me.
know now.
Cool. Yeah, it was good talking to you, man.
I appreciate it,
I'm
man.
not doing many panels or anything like that. So, but yeah, I don't really even tune in to a lot of the politics stuff anymore. I'll probably get drawn back into the void at some point, but I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
we all do.
Yeah, we do. Yep.
All right, later, buddy.
All right, see you, man.
Okay. Yeah, it took me. I understand why he was offended by me saying process. Then I missed it like the first 2 times he said it, and I felt stupid once I realized. I was like, ah, crap. Now I said that. I probably said that in a weird way. Yes, so it is an appeal to an authority foe. Just in case this is what you're saying, I don't know that this is what you're saying, but like, yeah, there's a fallacious appeal to authority, meaning that like you're appealing to something that isn't actually authoritative on a subject, right? So if you say like, guns are dangerous. Alec Baldwin told us that guns are dangerous, so like, we know that guns are dangerous now, right? Like he actually like shot somebody, right? Like he went through like a whole thing where he shot someone on accident because of how dangerous guns are, so he would know that guns are dangerous, right? Like he's not an authority on guns. Like he has no right to like speak on what on whether or not guns are dangerous. Whereas like a linguist would be, and I am not like a linguist in like I didn't go to school for this stuff or anything. This is just stuff that I study. This is stuff that I've worked in. This is like, fields that I've worked in. It's not, I am not like, I don't have a degree or anything like that before anybody gets upset with me for like acting like I'm a linguist. I don't normally refer to myself as a linguist because I don't think it's a helpful way of referencing myself. But in this case, when I'm saying this is the process that we're using for this to come to a conclusion here, or for this word, I would say that that's like you are practicing linguistics in that case. Wait, that's not appeal to authority? What do you mean? Appeal to authority is, I'm saying, a fallacious appeal to authority. Here, real quick, we only have like 10 more minutes left on this video, so we're going to finish this, and then whoever wants to can jump in. The link is in the description for the Discord.
Using that to communicate on some level where they relate to masculine and feminine through the ways that we anthropomorphize certain objects. So this is an argument. I didn't come up with this one. This was somebody else in my circle who heard the argument that I presented in favor of this, and they came up with this example, right? You could imagine somebody using like bitch is like a female dog, right? Something that how we see dogs as like incredibly masculine typically when we're talking.
I mean, this was an example that I was going to bring up, is actually like When I say we create more categories, therefore we can communicate more things, it's kind of like getting the word Karen, right? We all know what a Karen is. We all we can figure out what a Karen is. But for the longest time, we just called them a bitch, right? We just said, oh, that's a bitch, instead of it because it was just that was the easiest way to do it. But then we got the word Karen, which is a bitch, but it's much more specific on what it is we're talking about now. And now we have separate categories for this, where we have a bitch and we have a Karen, and these are different things. So now we can be more specific in what it is that we're communicating. There's more that comes with the idea of Karen. It's much more specific on what it is that we're talking about. And that's how I feel when we're talking about man versus male, is we're now being more specific on what it is that we're talking about by separating categories and having more words to communicate more things. So it's just a better way to be able to communicate things, by having more words and more concepts to communicate them.
About them, but like a female, somewhere in between, being more on the female side of things, but more masculine as it pertains to that. You could use that to communicate your gender identity as it pertains to that. That would be an example of some way that you could use it. Another one is as we've been talking about cats and dogs, you could use cat to describe something that isn't actually isn't a woman, right, but more on the feminine side of the spectrum. That would be more specific than saying I am feminine or I am masculine. So it would serve some kind of utility in that way.
Right, but isn't that sort of adding gender where there doesn't need to be?
You are saying something is gendered. This is what I was talking about before I started talking to Brent. So their argument is that this is gender, feminine and masculine. That is gender. Now, man and woman are saying you end up on this side or that side of the spectrum, meaning you end up on the feminine side, you're a woman. You end up on the masculine side, you are a man. But the way he's describing cat, yes, we would say cats are feminine things, dogs are masculine things, right? Cat is not now gender. It's not now on the gender spectrum. It's something that we could use to gender somebody. It could be a characteristic that is gendered, but it is not gender. That is completely different. This is totally different than what it is that they're pretending it is.
Recognize that we do sort of view some of these things as being feminine, being masculine and whatnot, but there's got to be a difference between us viewing something like a cat as being more feminine and then this actually being something you can identify as.
Well, I don't think they're identifying as I am actually a cat. When I think about myself, I am an actual cat, right? I see myself as a cat. What I think they're saying is, and
they're saying that they identify with a cat.
This is my experience from when I've talked to people who have had coherent arguments in favor of the xenogenders they identify with, is I'm saying that in the same way that the same kind of gendered language that we tend to employ doesn't describe to the specificity I would like it to my gender identity, and thus I am choosing to use another object that we have anthropomorphized to some degree with gender. I'm trying to say that my gender identity is that similar to the way that we view a cat, and I'm trying to reference some kind of internal understanding that we both have as people who live within a given society about how we view these things as it pertains to gender.
Okay. Yeah, so I you're definitely making more sense than the other people I've talked to. So congrats for that one. But does that mean then that there would still then have to be limitations on what is and is not gender?
Oh yeah, of course. There 100% is limitations on what is and is not gender.
Because I've been getting comments that people are saying gender is literally meaningless. It can be whatever I want it to be.
Well, yeah, I mean, that there's a lot of stupid people on the left and right and who can engage in politics.
Well, the thing, I don't know anymore. I genuinely don't know anymore. I'm like, is this just like I mean, obviously they're the fringe, vocal minority, of course.
Oh,
but
yeah, of course.
Where do you draw the line then? Would it still be then if this thing is outside of that masculinity, femininity spectrum?
I think that these are communicating things that are within the masculine femininity spectrum. That's what I think we're communicating. We're saying gender. We're either communicating gender identity, which is the way that you view yourself in relation to these categories, or the desire to be identified with these categories.
Yeah, no, that's where they're mixing it up. That's incorrect.
So you would say, so if somebody says they're cat gender, hypothetically, then they would say because of the external viewpoint of gender and the spectrum of femininity, masculinity, they perceive themselves foundationally more so with the feminine viewpoints.
Yeah,
with
I'm
cultural
more so
recognition of
feminine,
but
but I'm
then they
not
would
so
say,
feminine that I would categorize myself as a woman. I am somewhere in between there, and that's the specificity that you would add by using a metaphor. So I
right,
didn't
but
mean to
isn't
cut you
there
off,
already
my apologies.
are there already categories?
That's called non-binary. That's what he's talking about.
Like, aren't there like femme non-binary or
There is, yeah, these categories do exist, but this would be more specific than saying feminine, non-binary, because we're referencing some kind of more so than like
No, this is less specific.
almost conceiving of it and then trying to apply it. We're referencing some kind of shared experience that we have when viewing objects with gender. That's the way it's been described to me.
Interesting. Okay. So let me just try to repeat what I was saying here, because sometimes the best way that I understand is just to summarize and make sure I'm getting this. So if somebody is identifying, like I said, their cat gender, so internally their perception would still be influenced by the external viewpoint of gender, where they're like, yes, I'm definitely more on the feminine side of things, but they don't feel that they're fully feminine enough, or they don't have that desire to the point where they would be like a woman, like a trans woman, for example. So then they would recognize themselves as being more so feminine, but they would describe themselves by using terms that we already have sort of gendered as well.
Yeah, like terms that we've already.
Wait, yes, no, that's what, like, oh my goodness, this is what I'm talking about. They just debunked his entire bunk. Like, he is using a word that is gendered, but is not gender. It is gendered. So this is like saying, like, Barbie dolls are feminine things, but that is not, Barbie doll is not on the spectrum. It is just something we use that is gendered to gender other things. That is like it. This is my frustration here.
Oh shit! What's up?
Yo. Okay.
Yo. Okay. Apparently, you've already talked to Hunter about the convo. I assume I don't have to explain the basics of the position. What's the disagreement?
Okay. So, when you're talking about something being gendered, this is like you're kind of conflating a reference to something and the thing in and of itself, and this is a reference to a reference. So when we're talking about a cat is something that is gendered but not gender in and of itself, meaning that cat could not end up on the spectrum, right?
No shit.
So that seemed to be what you guys were saying, was that, because this is why people say that like xenogenders don't make sense, is because they are calling it gender, not an identity like attached to gender or referencing gender.
Because it is reference to gender, right? In the same way that like flaming is not heat. It is not on it's not on a thermometer. You won't look at a thermometer and see flaming, right? But if I say something's flaming hot, you get an idea of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I get that, but
does
like,
that make sense? Okay, good.
So because like you guys compared it to like you said it's like more specific than non-binary, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like non-binary is like kind of like a mix of femininity and masculinity, to where you're not like easily placed as like just a man or a woman. Whereas cat, like we would say that cat is a gendered thing, but we're using the spectrum to gender it. So whereas non-binary would be on the spectrum, it just the entire argument sounded like you guys were like placing cat on the spectrum somewhere.
So this is the thing that I don't know if I had to explain this to Hunter. I think maybe Hunter just like got it. I don't think it had needed quite a lot of explanation. I've heard people have a harder time with so I guess I'll try and communicate it in this way. So we have like conceptualization. We anthropomorphize things to degrees, right? You could say that like whenever I say cat, it invokes upon you some kind of feminine feeling, right? Like you might not be able to tell me exactly what that is, but there's some kind of qualia that I'm referencing there, right? Like some kind of shared experience.
Yeah.
Okay. And if I were to tell you, okay, you see that shared experience that you have, my gender identity is similar to that of the way that we place cats on the gender spectrum, right? I'm not saying that my gender is literally a cat, right? I'm using a metaphor, right? In the same way I say, like, I'm going to stand shoulder to shoulder with TOMFOOLERY in the fight against racism. I'm not saying that we're actually going to, like, meet up in real life and I'm going to be shoulder to shoulder with you, you know?
Yeah. We're conceptualizing it. Yeah, I get that. So, okay. Yeah, it seemed like in the conversation it kept sounding like it was being placed on the spectrum. The way that he was asking questions sounded like he was saying like, but we already have words for that, like non-binary. And then instead of you being like, well, it's not on the spectrum like non-binary, you were like, oh yeah, but it's just more specific. And so
Well,
almost every question he asked sounded like he's placing it on the spectrum. And then when you would respond, you're not saying it's not on the spectrum, making it sound like both of you thought it was on the spectrum.
The cats are not on the spectrum, but a spectrum is kind of like there's like a percentage we could say, but like using percentages kind of like defeats the point of a metaphor, right? Because it's like people don't think in percentages. I guess would be the best way I could put it.
Yeah, it's likelihoods. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's more specific in that I'm invoking the shared experience of the way that we gender a cat, and I'm saying it is similar to the way that you gender a cat. That's the way that I gender like my identity. It's like at the same amount of like feminine, like what do you call it? Like feminine experience, something like that. Right?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying in y'all's conversation, it sounds like he thinks you're placing it on the spectrum. And then now talking to you, it's like it's obvious you're saying it's not on the spectrum, but every question he asked made it like blatantly clear he felt like you were placing this on the spectrum, and that's what he was agreeing with. And now I'm like frustrated because I'm listening to this like he thinks this is on the frickin' spectrum, and it just doesn't make sense to spectrum
I do
this
think
thing.
that there are certain things that Hunter came away with where I don't think he understood, at least based on his tweet. But I'm comfortable in saying that Hunter had at least some kind of conceptualization of what I was saying, and I'm very appreciative because I think you can see that the conversation was not like hostile in any degree, which I do appreciate. Because there's almost every single time, I'm sure you're involved in the debate space as well, 90% of conversations are like screaming fests where people are just really mad at each other.
I mean, mine don't tend to be. It's normally like, but I don't actually watch Hunter very much because all of his conversations turn into that, and it's just kind of obnoxious.
Like, so one thing that I think that like I don't think he 100% is not 100% the case that I don't think he understood. It was he like said like tree gender is not valid, and people kind of like had some kind of misunderstanding with that. What I would say is the expression is not valid, right? Like that's not the way you should use language. That sounds ridiculous, and I have no idea what you're trying to say. I'm lost, right? Like, what are you trying to communicate to me? I have no clue. I don't think there's that shared understanding to the degree of which like you could say a tree, and that would be like more so useful. We have like a stronger gender connection to that than anything else, right? Like that would be the best. But there's probably some underlying gender identity they're trying to communicate to me. That's probably true. There's something motivating them. I just don't think it's the right way to use words. Like just in the same way that like somebody could have 100% a gender identity that is valid, and maybe they're just delusional and they think the best way to communicate that is by saying that they're like N-word gender, right?
Yes.
I would say that's not valid. Not that they don't have a gender identity, but it's not valid because of the expression, right? Like that expression is not something we should be using. That would be like my response to that. But like
I think
I'm open to accepting like Hunter might not have understood certain things, and I'm like totally willing to have a follow-up conversation with Hunter because it was a great conversation between the two of us. But like like if things need clarification, I suppose we could talk some other time.
Yeah, so so we can gender almost anything like that would have something to do with masculinity and femininity, right? So we can look at like a basketball and say like or being a Falcons fan or like something like that. We would say like because it is more likely that this is done by a male, this is now called masculine. Like that's kind of how we would,
to some degree, right?
Right. And so we would use likelihoods in this case. But when we have people saying like I'm deer gender or I'm cuttlefish gender, they are not saying like this references back to something that is gendered. They're saying this is gender. And so I appreciate that you actually said like this is just like the best argument that I've heard, not necessarily what xenogenders actually are. Because what xenogenders are like an identity that I think is valid and it's fine and it's cool. It's just not gender. It can be gendered, but not gender. And that's where I get into frustrations with xenogenders.
Certain people are saying that when they say xenogenders. People are using this as like for example, I talked to somebody else the other day who was like using it in the exact way, and they identify with xenogenders, right? And I'm not saying so everybody uses them. I think some people have disagreements, but I think if I actually pick people's brains on it, I start asking them actual questions about it, they'll come to realize that either what they're describing isn't gender, or that if it is gender, it fits my description of the reason that they're using that language, right? So like this is the argument, I suppose, in favor of valid xenogenders. That's the argument that I've developed in favor of the valid ones, at least.
Yeah, so I would just from the beginning be like, let's just not call it xenogenders. Let's call it xeno identities or just xeno like something. But
Yeah,
if
but
it's
if somebody's using a xenogender to identify, or a xeno identity to define their gender, I think it's fine to call it a xenogender. I just think it's like, yeah, like the language is kind of like convoluted and trash. I don't know. I've talked to somebody else as well today who was like super like insane about this topic in like the favor area. I don't know. The topic's kind of like ridiculous, and I feel like it's a non-issue, but I do think it's an interesting language conversation nonetheless.
Yeah, so normally that's what I'm getting into is normally I'm trying to explain to people what it is that we're communicating when we use words like man and woman. And like I have like an entire doc on this now where like I'm trying to go over like every possible aspect of this. And this is why I have issues with just even like categorizing this as gender, is because it just doesn't fall into the gender category, but it is something that's gendered. So like, but you know, we can look at like little personality traits or body language that would be gendered, but we wouldn't say that this is like an identity unto itself just because it's gendered, right? But the things that they're identifying with, it is like an external identity that can be valid in and of itself just because they identify with that thing, or there are things about their characteristics about that thing that they identify with. It just doesn't seem to be gendered. So like,
It's
you know
not
Doe,
always
right?
gender. Yeah. I think I've heard of this Doe person. I don't know too much about them. I do know that they're like, they have like the deer meme and they go by its, I think.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and they
gotcha.
say that they don't actually identify as a deer, but that they have deer gender. And they say that the entire point of xenogender is to complicate the idea of gender so that we get better at breaking down stereotypes and gendered expectations. And it's like, okay, so this is my entire issue with xenogenders, is that you guys are complicating what this concept is while we're trying to like educate people on this. You're also making it harder to educate people on this.
Yeah, you're just making it more complicated, right? Like, that's why, like, certain people are going to agree with my definition of xenogender. Certain people are not going to agree with that. I think if you don't agree with it, what you just run into is you just run into a contradiction. Like, you're just contradicting yourself. It's incoherent. Like, if, oh, no, my gender is gender, but it's also not gender. It's like, no, that's not the case. You're either mistaken, or you're saying something that you don't actually mean.
Well, when they believe that, so like this is a problem that I have with Hunter a lot, is when he starts talking about gender, he always starts off by saying it is a socially constructed thing, and it's like, damn, dude, you are like dumbing this down to such like almost like pointless language now if you just say it's socially constructed and then just leave it at that. It's all categorizations are socially constructed to some extent, but there are real things within life that attach to the idea of gender, and there are actual biological drives to make us act one way or the other, more masculine or more feminine. And so like it just seems to miss the entire idea of gender to just be like, oh well, it's this social construct that we invented. It's like, bro, you're like, it's not, we didn't just invent it. The patterns existed and we acknowledge the patterns and then label them.
We categorize the patterns, we categorize the way that we identify with those patterns, and we call that gender. We're describing, not even that it's socially constructed, right? What I mean, it kind of is, but
the category is socially constructed.
Like I would just say, like, I'm a pragmatist when it comes to that. Like, it's just like everyone is socially constructed. Like, but when we're talking about gender, we're recognizing a sociological phenomenon. We're like acknowledging it, and we're trying to describe it, and we're trying to study it. I guess one thing is I do highly object to the idea that, like, oh yeah, everything should be gender because we want to abolish gender. It's like, well, you're not abolishing the gender, you're just abolishing the word. You're just making the word
expectations is what they want to abolish.
Yeah, you want to abolish gender roles. I think that's totally fine. If you want to make like you're not pressured as like a guy to get into sports or something like that, like I think that's totally good. Like, go for it, knock yourself out. My problem is like you're not abolishing it, you're just making it harder to describe what it is, and we're not going to abolish it if we don't know what the fuck we're talking about. We're going to get confused. Everyone's just going to be in a delusional like la la land. And that's why I think language is like such an interesting thing to have conversations about, because a lot of people confuse the mouth sounds that we're making with the underlying concepts that we're talking about.
Right.
And I think that like clarifying that for people is it leads to better discussions.
Yeah, that was literally my entire issue as we were going over it. It's like they're conflating the concept with the reference to the concept over and over, and that's where I kept having issues. Is I was like, this just doesn't make sense. Like you can't conflate the concept with the reference. Okay, so we agree there. That's good. I wanted to clarify that. I reached out to Hunter as well, because I'm like, bro, I feel like just the way that he was wording everything and the way that he kept like asking questions, it sounds like he believes that this is like on the gender spectrum, and that's what he was agreeing to in the end, which now like, just frustrates me more.
No. What I suppose what like I'm trying to get at is just like, oh yeah, I can see somebody using a xenogender to communicate something in the same way that I can see somebody using like when Bruce Lee says like become water, he doesn't actually mean he wants to like transform into water, right? He's describing like the way that you view water as like fluid and adaptable. That's what he's trying to get at, right? In the same way you like that's what you're trying to get at with as gender. Is like the way that you view the gender of a cat. Like that's how I identify. Like that's the position.
Yeah, it's more. Yeah, it's like the likelihood of its existence close to female or male is. And normally we would think like, okay, like women are more likely to like cats, men are more likely to like dogs, and so therefore we would somewhat have those gendered conceptually. But
or
they
not even
necessarily
they are more likely, right? Just but we think that it's more likely, or we think of it as more. That's
what I'm saying. Yes.
In the same way, like if I say I'm a bear in the morning, it doesn't matter if bears are actually grumpy in the morning. Like it could just be the thing that like you think they're grumpy in the morning. You've not seen any data on that. I sure as hell haven't, right? But the communication, we still know what you're saying. I still know that you mean like you're grumpy in the morning.
Yep.
Okay. Sick. All right. It was a good chat.
Yep. Cool. Appreciate it, man.
I appreciate the chat. See you next time, my dude.
Later. All right. I would say instead of abolishing gender roles, it should be abolishing gender expectations. Right, that's what I'm saying, is gender expectations. That's what I was trying to say, is the expectations of gender, not gender roles.